Rodin?
Rodi, R-O-D-I.
Rodi, Middle Eastern guy.
Yeah, Rodi's a
I think it's like in
scumbag.
philosophy.
I'm not
What's
familiar
the problem
with
with him?
You don't remember Rodi? R-O-D-I?
him. Probably, but I talk with so many people, and at my advanced Joe Biden senile age, it's hard to remember.
So this one
RODI. He's the guy with the face, the cartoon face as a logo.
Yes.
And a blue background.
Yes. It's some Marvel character, I think.
So if this is one of those videos where they try to make it seem like it's atheist thug life moments or something. Oh, favorite atheist quote. So I said.
Okay.
So this person is probably an atheist.
Okay.
Sean Carroll, huh?
Yeah, live from Atheist Helpline. It's review time of stupid things atheists say.
Man, people are just dropping in this room.
No reason for God to be hard to find. He should be perfectly obvious, whereas in naturalism you might expect people believe in God, but the evidence to be thin on the ground. Under theism, you'd expect that religious beliefs should be universal. There's no reason for God to give special messages for whims. And I'm going to zoom through these. It's not the individual arguments that are important, it's the accumulated effect. If theism were really true, there's no reason for God to be hard to find. He should be.
Okay, did he prove that? Did he make a case that the world and all the facts that he's acquainted with do not necessitate referencing God? He just takes it as a given.
Well, also that's just a non sequitur that if theism was true, therefore God will be easy to find. How does that follow?
That's correct. If what he's thinking of is he's excluding deism. All right, which is a fallacy right there. Right, that fallacy.
I noticed.
So
I was doing a little breakdown with my brother earlier about this very thing. Like when they say God is hard to find, or they say an equivalent claim of there isn't been sufficient evidence for God presented. Now, what I've noticed is one of three things that you could do with that claim. One, they're saying that God is not necessary at all. Therefore, there is no evidence that could be indicative of Him. Two, they're saying some things may indicate God, while other things may not. Or three, if God exists, then God is too stupid to make certain things indicate that He does exist in that world that He instantiates. Like, how can you say that there is no evidence for God without saying, like, let's say God created the trees outside. You don't think that's evidence for God. And you're basically saying, oh, that tree outside, God is so stupid that tree outside didn't even point to His existence. This is literally what you have to believe as an atheist.
The evidential approach is actually catering to the false beliefs by saying, okay, we're going to capitulate to you that everything is not indicative of God. But look at all this collection of facts here. Doesn't that make you really want to believe in God? Right? And they may appeal to some great probabilistic reasoning, but they're still capitulating to the false beliefs. Right? So he's talking now about the hiddenness of God. So Parakeet is right. Right? It doesn't follow that if theism is true, and I use that in the broad sense, it doesn't follow from that we would know that God exists. Only if a certain kind of God exists would we expect that He would construct the world in such a way that He makes His existence known. So this is a major fail. Okay, this is a total concrete facial on the sidewalk.
It doesn't even follow that in that world God hasn't made His existence known.
Now, what would Sean Carroll say? Yeah, what would Sean Carroll say? Say, excuse me, Professor Carroll, does that follow from deism?
Yeah, but
Professor Carroll, could he answer that? No, he couldn't.
In that world, it doesn't even follow that God hasn't made His existence known. For all he knows, there could be from his perspective, there could be a world in which the God creator makes Himself known to some people and not others. Like, it doesn't follow that because you don't know about God in whatever world that is, that therefore that there is no God. or that you would know about him specifically.
All right.
Should be perfectly obvious, whereas in naturalism, you might expect people.
So again, this is a non sequitur. Okay, this is a top atheist debater that atheists look up to, and this is an elementary mistake that you would expect a teenager to make, not from a somebody who's a physicist or whatever Sean Carroll's credentials are, right?
Is that William Lane Craig on the end there to the left side?
Yes, it is. Yes, that is Craig William Lane. Yes. So it doesn't follow if that what is fundamental to reality is personal, that we would then know that God exists. How does that follow? Right? It does follow in the case of the Christian God that he will make his existence known. That does follow from the Christian worldview. But you see, Sean Carroll is not arguing simply against the Christian worldview. He's arguing against all God views. So this is a major faceplant.
People believe in God, but the evidence to be thin on the ground. Under theism, you'd expect that religious beliefs should be universal. There's no reason for God to give special messages to this or that primitive.
Why would you expect that? See, this is another concrete facial. He tripped, and he has a concrete facial. You wouldn't expect that. See, this is more, pseudo-intellectualism.
Tribe thousands of years ago, why not give it to anyone? Whereas under naturalism, you'd expect different religious beliefs inconsistent with each other to grow up under different local conditions. Under theism, you'd expect religious doctrines to last a long time.
Why would you even expect that under naturalism? Why expect anybody to talk about any worldviews or religions at all?
Why would you have any expectation for any naturalism?
Yeah, for any perspective on
because under naturalism, anything can happen. Why would you have any expectations? Yeah, that's a great point. Under naturalism, why would you have any expectations that the world will look or behave in any particular way?
Yeah, he's introducing something very specific. Notice that, and to the exclusion of every other possibility. That's hilarious.
Yeah. By the way, Supreme Leader, are you there? Supreme Leader.
Yes, I'm here.
Are you perchance streaming this?
Yes.
Okay, good. So is it tagged under atheism?
Yes.
Excellent. So that if they do a search for atheist stuff, it'll come under. Okay, great. So
no, his thing won't get hit, will it? Because he's doing this to another.
I don't know what he's doing, but I suspect that Supreme Leader is clever enough that he's taking precautions, right? Am I correct on that, Supreme Leader?
Yeah, I can explain to you what happened later.
Yeah, just do it privately. Okay, so at least if the atheists, if they tune in, they'll be able to see this on YouTube live streaming. Whether or not it remains at a particular channel. Okay, so let's continue. See, this is like shooting fish in a barrel with Sean Carroll. I mean, this guy's doing a major face plant on the concrete.
This is like shooting parakeets in a cage.
No. We wouldn't want to do that. Yeah, but this is just too easy.
I'm in a stable way. Under naturalism, you'd expect them to adapt to social conditions. Under theism, you'd expect the moral teachings of religion to be transcendent.
Okay, notice those universal claims he's making.
Yeah, you would expect it. Well, why would you expect it under theism? Okay. Now he might try to level that argue against Christianity, but it won't work. But under theism, you see, he's not even arguing for theism differentiated from deism here, right? So the point is, his theism is just it's a generic theism. God creates this world. So why would you have any expectations? Where do you get these expectations from?
What he's doing, maybe not explicitly, but implicitly, is he's imagining it has to be this way, and it cannot be any other way. And if the world seems to act any other way than what I imagine, it cannot be true or real. Like, you would expect it in this way, because I imagine it would be this way, it has to be this way. Therefore, anything outside that scope is irrational. That's what he's doing.
Only in the Christian worldview can we have expectations, right? Outside the Christian worldview, how would you ground any expectations? You know. Okay, so scientists say, why do you have that username? Could you explain that? Scientists say, are you there? Can you explain your username?
He's spoken before. He has a microphone.
Okay, good. We'll just remove him from the room. That's all. Okay. Herodotus, you need to get a reaction roll. You need to get a roll. Go down to Reaction Rolls text channel and pick a worldview role that best represents your metaphysic. Okay, Herodotus?
I'll do that, sir.
Thank you. Okay. So, Atheist, can you explain to me why you don't care about God's existence when you could very well be facing eternal damnation and separation from God? Why would you be apathetic about that? Isn't it amazing how cowardly these people are? So this is why we got to compliment some of these people who come in here, you know, and they're willing to talk, where these other people are just gutless cowards. Okay, since he's gutless, we'll continue with hold on a second.
Progressive, sexism is wrong, slavery is wrong. Under naturalism, you'd expect that they reflect, once again, local mores, sometimes.
Why would you expect anything on naturalism? Why? Notice again, you know, Greg Bonson's dictum, okay? That we're dealing with unbelievers 80% of the time, meaning the majority of the time, we're going to be dealing with unargued presuppositions, okay, and unargued for presuppositions. The other one was what? Conjecture.
Prejudicial conjecture.
Yeah. You'll forgive me. I'm approaching Joe Biden's age.
Prejudicial
conjecture. Yeah.
So scientists says back.
I swear that in one of his statements he said ignorant conjecture as well, and I love that one.
Well, scientists say
that's good because it's not. You know what? That's a really good one. Thank you for bringing that up, because it truly is ignorant conjecture. So because when they conjecture, they're doing so from a state of ignorance, because it emanates from their not God worldview, right? So their conjecture is some type of projection. Well, why would you expect any of that, right? Why should we expect anything if God has revealed himself in creation? Yeah, scientists say, I removed you from the room because you're not introducing yourself, okay? Are you there, scientists?
Sorry, Darth. I just stepped away to make coffee. I'm back. I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem. Okay, so why is your name Scientist Says?
Oh, it's just meant to be like a tongue-in-cheek reference to the way people who scream about science having all the answers, they just reflexively say, scientists say this, scientists say that. So I just thought I'd make a joke about it.
Oh, okay.
The high priest of the secular world.
Yeah, exactly.
I noticed how he spelled it. That's pretty hilarious. TISS.
Okay, but just to be clear here, you've selected the role agnostic. Now, you do understand that Gnosticism is an outward claim of not being committed to one way or other about God's existence, but in fact, it is. You deny God's existence indirectly, so you really should change your role to atheist.
I do understand. I think I understand that idea and viewpoint. So, and I've talked with you before. I just thought if it's okay, if I can just listen a little bit longer to.
That's perfectly fine. I'm not trying to give you a hard time, but since you're in the room and we have such few cowards. We have such few atheists or agnostics that have backbone. So yeah, that's perfectly fine. Okay, so let's continue with Shawnee character with his idiotic reasoning here. So far whenever he says you should expect this, you should expect that. Well, on what metaphysical grounds do you expect that? On what? Right? So Bonson is right. We have prejudicial conjecture and we have unargued presuppositions. Right? Unargued presuppositions and prejudicial conjecture. And this is prejudicial conjecture here. We would expect this to be this way. We would expect this to be that way, right? Well, that's prejudicial conjecture and ignorant conjecture. And we got to give credit to Parakeet for that. Okay, let's continue.
Not so good. You'd expect the sacred texts under theism to give us interesting information. Tell us about the germ theory of disease. Tell us to wash our hands before we have dinner.
Why would you even expect that?
Okay.
I mean, this is just. Yeah, this is the. I mean, this is the kind of reasoning that you would expect from a kind of clever junior or senior in high school, not from somebody who has a PhD.
Here's the thing: does he actually believe the texts are sacred, or is he just saying that because other people believe they're sacred?
See, we shouldn't be intimidated because these people have PhDs. Because look what happened to Massimo Pilucci. Look at how that guy got routed in less than 4 minutes. Okay?
He says the sacred text of the Bible as opposed to the sacred texts in the secular universities, right?
Yeah, well, they're sacred texts, but not in the same way that they're making an appeal to the supernatural. But they're sacred texts in that they're appealing to the undercurrent that's behind these texts is that the mind of man is autonomous, and the mind of man can discern. I'm sorry, hold on a second. Okay, so my voice activity is on. Okay. So yeah, it is. They are appealing to these sacred texts because the undercurrent in there is that the mind of man is autonomous, and the mind of man, merely through an inductive survey, can discern general universal principles or categories of existence. Right. So yeah, that is their sacred text, their prejudicial conjecture.
You'd expect that sacred text to be a mishmash, some really good parts, some poetic parts, and some boring parts and mythological parts. Under theism, you'd expect biological forms to be designed. Under naturalism, they would derive from the twists and turns.
Why would you expect that? Okay. See, now, granted, it is true that the theory of evolution is the fertile soil out of which atheism grows. Right? Because their attitude is, well, we can just explain things through purely materialistic processes, and it facilitates their embracing not Godism. But evolution doesn't get you to atheism. It doesn't follow from it, right? In spite of the fact that atheists, by and large, owe most of their atheism to their belief in evolution. Right? Even Darwin acknowledged this. So again, Sean Carroll is face planting. I mean, this is not the intelligent reasoning of a man with a PhD. This is the reasoning of maybe a junior or sophomore in high school.
Yeah. Notice when he touches on what you would expect in like a sort of a God universe. Notice the implicit. The unstated mention of God being treated as a creature, right? The unstated mentioning of God being treated as a creature, but he's saying, what you expect in this world is for God to act this way and that way, because this is the reality that God would be in, so he would comport to these sets of rules as if God is like any other creature. So this is what you would see from that.
So just remember, anytime we have somebody like Sean Carroll saying, we should expect this, we should expect that, that's prejudicial and ignorant conjecture. Where do you get that from in your world? Where? And you see, they're eventually, what they're going to have to do is they're either going to have to directly or indirectly make an appeal to the foundational parameters that God instituted in creation. and they're going to have to say, well, these things just exist. Well, then on what grounds do you say they exist? And whatever grounds they give it to you, they're going to be violating their own criterion of belief. Okay, it's that simple. So
is this a debate?
It's a debate between Sean Carroll and Craig William Lane, and basically this is a video of so-called great atheist bomb drops.
So what I'm thinking is this: when he uses the word expectation, does he mean what would like to happen, or what is supposed to happen, what ought to happen, independent of whether he likes it or not?
No, what he's saying is, if X is true, we would expect to see Y. Okay? If X is true, we would expect to see Y. Okay.
And it has to happen in a certain way, independent of whether we like it or not. It's going to happen in that way, specifically, and necessarily given that expectation, right?
Right. So one of the lines of reasoning that I used to use, that I don't use very much anymore, is when atheists say there's no evidence for God, and I'll say, well, what would the evidence be that you would expect to be there if it is the case that God exists? Right? Why would you expect that? Right?
I still think that's a good question, even though you don't use it as much anymore. I still think it's a great question.
Oh, it is good, but I think that I've moved on to more precise surgical dismantling of what they say. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Darth. I wanted to ask because you said, what evidence would they need? What if they say like physical evidence we can observe?
No, when they say there's the more I began to understand the biblical position, and by that means when I started reading Van Til and Bonson, and they kept on pointing out not just what the Bible says, but the ramifications and the implications of what God has revealed. Okay.
Well, you
then
see,
I moved. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. Well, I was going to just address his question. See, the thing is when they say that, when you ask them what kind of evidence they would need, well, if they understood the concept of God we're talking about, they would have to say, well, no evidence you present to me could show it, because they've already decided that there's a bunch of facts out there that are not evidence for God. And in a world where there's a whole bunch of facts that are not evidence for God, no facts could ever be evidence for God.
Yeah.
Right. So if they were being honest, they'd have to say, well, nothing you could present would be evidence for God.
Exactly.
God
so
doesn't
even
exist.
if they saw a miracle, like Donald Trump, parted the Atlantic Ocean, right? And of course, tongue in cheek. Why would that convince them of God? Because in a not God world, there's nothing preventing that.
And if I could piggyback off that, that was the type of exercise that Tyler Vela was pressing Mr. Eric Permboy Murphy on. He was just essentially.
I was going to mention that.
Yeah,
and
he was.
Eric came up with an answer. Eric gave some answer about some event. I forget what, but he said I'd see that as evidence for God. And Tyler Vela said, well, why would that be evidence for God? Why wouldn't that be just? I forget how he phrased it, but basically he's saying, why wouldn't that just be evidence of strange things happening in a naturalistic world?
Yeah, great point. Yeah. And Tyler's not even a presuppositionalist, but that is an absolute astute point.
Yeah, I was mentioning this. I was mentioning this to my brother earlier. We're talking about things like the typical standard answers that the atheists say would be evidence for God, presumably like supernatural miracles and grown amputees and stuff like that. For the grown amputees example, I just say, hey, why would that necessarily be evidence for God? Why is that not just an unexplained natural phenomenon? My brother was like, well, maybe that's some element of evolution that's been undiscovered. Why not? Like, why not just put skepticism at the end of every potential claim that you see? Even if we're talking about someone rising from the dead, why would that necessarily be evidence for God? Why would Jesus?
So in other words, they don't have grounds. They don't have metaphysical grounds to be skeptical of anything. And in their world, although they claim that they want to believe, and if they saw certain occurrences, that would be evidence of God. But the point is, in their world, nothing could be evidence of God. Yeah, because nothing's impossible. Now, they're not always claiming that nothing's impossible, but you see, this is what their worldview requires. because
Yeah.
impossibility cannot be grounded
Yeah.
at all.
Why not put skepticism to the exclusion of a supernatural explanation or to a creator God explanation? Why not put skepticism at the end of that? Because just because we don't know about it or don't understand it doesn't mean it's a God, right? And why not relentlessly apply that to every potential explanation? Why not?
As a matter of fact, I think an atheist had some words of wisdom that took this to its core. That was T. Jump. He said, "Any supernatural explanation you give me, I can just reinterpret it along
There
naturalistic
you
lines."
go.
There you
There
go.
you go.
Exactly.
Yeah. You know what? Like a broken clock. The clock is wrong all day long, but it's right twice a day. Oh gosh, and that's right.
But at
Anything
least
you present, yeah.
at least in that regard, T Jump and Dump, as I call him, is the only one being relentlessly consistent with his worldview. Like someone like an Eric Pernboy Murphy is not. He's saying, "Well, there is something that convinced me." Well, not if
We
you're
lost them.
relentless.
We
Yeah,
lost them.
yeah, we
Yeah. What
lost it.
happened? Oh, what happened? We lost them.
Yeah, not if you're
You know.
being relentlessly consistent with your skepticism. There is no thing that could possibly convince you of God, so you're lying.
Okay, so all we're getting here from Sean Carroll, and by the way, as critical as we are of Sean Carroll, I am not trying to say that this is a stupid guy. Okay, Sean Carroll, we can respect his academic achievements and respect that this is a really smart guy, but what he's saying right now is pure crap. Right? It's absolute crap. It is prejudicial and ignorant conjecture. He cannot back any of this stuff up. Now, these are the same people who say, prove your God, prove your God. Yet he wouldn't be able to support any of that.
Of evolutionary history. Under theism, minds should be independent of bodies. Under naturalism, your personality should change if you're injured, tired, or you haven't had your cup of coffee yet.
Again,
Okay,
here we go again. Basically, what he's thinking of is a special, unique category of theism, but he couldn't even defend that.
And
But
by the way, he
remember,
says mind should be independent of bodies. Well,
yeah,
how does he know that in some way the mind is not independent of the body?
yeah, that's an implicit counterclaim, isn't it? That the mind is dependent upon the body, given the naturalist framework. That's
What
an
he seems to
implicit
imagine
counterclaim right
is
there.
either all one way or all another way. It's all either the mind is completely dependent on the body or completely independent from that. This way he stated it.
Yep, it cannot be two things happening at once. It cannot be. Yeah,
Supreme Leader, are you there?
Yes.
When you are showing the stream, can you have a window? Are you using something like OBS?
Yeah, OBS.
Okay, can you put a window there so that people listening to the live stream can see how many people are in here? Right, because I think that might influence some of them to want to come in if the room is packed out, rather than they're just thinking that there's just 2 or 3 people chattering back and forth.
Yeah, I'll think about a way to do that.
Okay, actually, the way I did it, when there's a long list of people, I create 2 windows in OBS, and what they will basically be doing is displaying the list of names. But one of the windows I shorten from the top, one from the bottom, and then one will display the top half of the list, and the other will display the bottom half. Okay, it's pretty easy to do. If you could figure out how to do that, that would be great, because then the people will see that we have 23 people in here.
It
Right?
seems what atheists are doing when they talk about how we are to analyze the God question in terms of evidence is to look at it in terms of a subjective notion of Occam's razor. They're saying that supernatural explanations must be preferred to the exclusion of supernatural explanations until whatever other explanations push them towards supernatural ones. But why do they say natural to the exclusion of supernatural first? Why don't they look at it the other way around? Why one way and rather than the other way? Why don't they just say everything ought to be looked at in a supernatural realm and then the natural, rather than everything must be presupposed to the natural realm before we can bridge to the supernatural. They only say one way because they're prejudiced, they're biased, and they don't want to admit it.
You know, the more I debate atheists and I reflect on listening to Bonson's lecture, the more I am impressed at his wisdom.
Under theism, you'd expect that maybe you can explain the problem of evil. God wants us to have free will, but there shouldn't be random suffering in the universe. Life should be essentially just. And at the end of the day, in theism, you basically expect the universe to be perfect. Under naturalism, it should be.
No. Why under theism would you expect it to be perfect? Okay. Only if you have a God that is what we call the God of perfect being theology, where God has all great making property, right? So he is conflating perfect being theology with just general theism, right? Does everybody see the problem here? Right?
Yep.
Because in perfect being theology, you can have some expectations from perfect being theology, okay? And we did have that when God got done creating, right? He says everything was good. There was nothing lacking. There was no defect. There was no flaw. But now we have the flaw. But you see, he's not taking into consideration that our present world is an abnormal state. That it's a temporal judgment from God and not the original state. Right? So here's his absolute blunder, right? In this debate here, that what he's attacking is a kind of perfect being theism, as opposed to just general theism, where what is fundamental is a mind, is a creator, and then that creator simply, for whatever reason, creates a world and then has it operate in a certain way. Right? So this is the mistake here. This is a real amateur mistake. This is what you would expect from a high school student.
Be kind of a mess.
I
This
wish
is
you
very
had.
strong.
Does this include William Lane Craig's response, or
No, this is just atheist bomb turds. Okay, where they drop turds. Okay, but the guy who did it, this YouTube channel is promoting atheism. So I thought what we'll do is we just listen to atheists shoot themselves in the foot, and then we can laugh at their foot bleeding. Okay. But Craig is just going to give an evidentialist response. Now, from time to time, Craig does say some very good and true things, like why would you expect this?
I think I've seen this debate, and I think he does ask him, why would we expect to see that? I think he does ask him that several times.
Well, we can find that longer video and try to find where he does that.
Empirical evidence. Now I know what you're thinking.
I know what you're thinking. I know what you're doing. Maybe he knows Shannon Q. Duck Lips. I know what you're thinking.
Does he know what we're thinking? What we're thinking is none of this follows. How does he establish any of this?
Yeah, what we're thinking is what you just dropped was a whole series of just a prejudicial conjecture and ignorant conjecture. Okay, it's ignorant because you can't back any of this up, right? Can you imagine if he got confronted and saying, Dr. Carroll, you're just attacking perfect being theology or theism. What about a generic theism that doesn't include perfect being theology?
I think this is why we can tell the Christian God's always on their mind.
Yeah. Yes. That is so true, because they really don't take these other God concepts or even a generic God. And when I say generic, I don't mean necessarily a deist God, but it could include it, but it doesn't necessarily include it. And you're right. This is they're revealing. This is like teenage boys where they always slip up talking about the latest curvaceous girl on campus. Oh gosh, that's right. It's on his mind.
You're thinking, but I can explain all of that. I know you can explain all. So can I. It's not hard to come up with ex post facto justifications for why God would have done it that way.
Ex post facto explanation. Let's look that up, okay? Okay, so let's see. Ex facto.
I believe he said something about ex post facto, something or something.
Okay, did I hear that wrong? What did I get?
Well, none of us have even tried to bring up anything about why God would have done it that way, because he hasn't established that we should expect it to be that way.
Thinking, but I can explain all of that. I know you can explain all. So can I. It's not hard to come up with ex post facto justification.
Ex post facto justification. Ex post facto.
Yeah, so but what he's saying is that his criticisms are easily rebutted. Right? That's what he's saying. Is that he's just conjecturing, and you can point out you don't know that.
Okay, ex post facto is where you declare someone's action to be criminal only after it was committed. Okay. Yeah. So what he's saying is we're only basically what he's saying is they're doing an ad hoc explanation. That's what's good.
For why God would have done it that way. Why is it not hard? Because theism is not well defined. That's what computer scientists call a bug, not a feature. Immanuel Kant famously said, there will never be an Isaac Newton for a blade of grass. In other words, sure, you can find some physical explanation for the motion of the planets, but never for something as exquisitely organized and complex as a biological organism. Except, of course, that Charles Darwin then went and did exactly that.
No, he did not. No, he did not. Oh my gosh. You see the blind faith they have in evolution? I would just love to raise my hand. Oh, Professor Carroll. Yo, Professor Carroll. What reason do you have to believe that mutations could accrue to build the body plans and anatomy and physiology of complex organisms? Why would you believe that beneficial mutations could do that over a long period of time? Right? So here again, evolution doesn't get you to atheism, but even though it doesn't follow that if evolution is true that there is no God, but what does follow here is that this is the rich and fertile soil out of their God denialism flourishes. Let's play that back and let's all listen very in a somber and a contemplative manner. In the way he mentions the prophet, peace be upon him, Charles Darwin. Okay, so I don't want any interruptions while he mentions the prophet, peace be upon him, Charles Darwin.
Explanation for the motion of the planets, but never for something as exquisitely organized and complex as a biological organism. Except, of course, that Charles Darwin then went and did exactly that.
Did you notice what he left out there? He mentioned Charles Darwin, but he didn't say peace be upon him. Right? Did you notice that? And I would encourage every single
What a heretic. Is this guy? This guy can't be an academic. He doesn't have the proper respect for the current paradigm.
Listen. I think ridicule for ridicule's sake is not worthy in these debates. But when ridicule is based upon a substantive criticism, I think it's fine. Okay, and these people treat Darwin like he's Moses. They treat him like the Muslims almost treat Muhammad. So we should take a page from their own book every time we mention Charles Darwin, right? And you notice how I verbally chastise people when they don't say Shannon Q. Ducklips, right? Don't say Eric Permboy Murphy. Don't say Matt Dillabloviator. So from now on, it's Charles Darwin, peace be upon him, because that is their prophet. This is the prophet of atheism.
You have to follow the right decorum, the right rituals.
Yes, it's protocol. Okay, Charles Darwin, peace be upon him. Right?
We can paraphrase Dr. Craig's message as saying, there will never be an Isaac Newton for the cosmos. But everything we know about the history of science and the current state of physics says we should be much more optimistic than that. Thank
you. And now for the bisexual alcoholic Christopher Hitchens, who right now he believes in God.
Please. If there is no God, Why do you spend your whole life trying to convince people that there isn't?
Okay, did everybody hear that? If there is no God, why have you spent your whole life trying to convince people that there's not?
Why don't you just stay home?
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, why are you spending your life trying to convince people that there's no God when you believe there's no God? Why are you doing that?
Was the question?
The question is,
and by the way, you know, Christopher Hitchens, peace be upon him, the drunk that he was, constantly is talking about our species this, our species that. Well, the reason why people believe in God is because they've evolved to be that way, and people like himself have evolved, partly due to him being a drunk. They've evolved through operant conditionings not to believe in God. So believing God or not believing in God is neither here nor there in the atheist worldview. It just is what is.
if there is no God, why spend your life and career trying to refute that? Why not just leave it alone and stay home? Fair enough.
Well, it isn't my whole career, for one thing. It's become a major.
It's not his whole career. It's not his whole career. He does he does not spend all of his time attacking the belief in God. He spends a good amount of time drinking every day, okay? Look at his face. You see his face is all red? You see that? Do you think that's because he has a green thumb and he's working out in the garden every day? Does everybody know what that's symptomatic of? Bueller? Anyone want to take a stab?
I just can't believe you're talking about a high priest this way. How dare you?
Christopher Hitchens, peace be upon him, may his soul rot in hell forever. Okay? He was a drunk. Okay? Now, when you look at him at frequently public appearances, his face is very red. This is a very common thing with people who are drunks, right? It produces a redness to the face. It's not
He's just thirsty for knowledge.
Yeah.
Major preoccupation of my life.
Well, he's thirsty for knowledge, but in a not God world, he can't know anything, so he has to drown it in drink.
Yeah.
9 years, especially since September 11th, 2001, to try and help generate an opposition to theocracy and its depredations internationally. That is.
Oh yeah. Like there's a serious movement where theocracy is going to take over. Okay. I mean, what BS? I mean, this guy is one of the biggest BSers out there. But guess what? He's not BSing anymore. He's quaking in his boots because he knows that he's facing Judgment Day.
It is now probably my main political preoccupation. To help people in Afghanistan, in Somalia, in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Israel, to resist those who sincerely want to encompass the destruction of civilization and sincerely believe they have God on their side in wanting to do so. I think maybe I will take.
Yeah, but you think you have molecules on your side. So what? Right? When you listen to his debate between him and William Lane Craig in the Q&A session, he couldn't defend atheism. Right? These people are so emotionally adamant, quietly within themselves, of the truth of not Godism, yet he won't come out and defend it.
Take a few minutes just to say something that I find repulsive about especially monotheistic messianic religion.
Wait a minute. Repulsive. Notice the disdain. Notice the hierarchy of values. Notice the value judgments that he's making. In a not God world, nothing can be defended to be impossible. Right? So why is anything bad? Nothing will be bad. His buddy, Richard Dawkins, this is what his buddy says here, okay? Richard Dawkins says, in a universe of electrons and selfish genes, blind physical forces, and genetic replication, Some people are going to get hurt. Other people are going to get lucky. And you won't find any rhyme or reason or any justice. The universe that we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is, at bottom, no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but pitiless indifference. Why is this prophet contradicting that prophet? Okay? Why is Christopher Hitchens, peace be upon him, contradicting his fellow prophet, Richard Dawkins, peace be upon him? Okay?
Why does Richard Dawkins contradict himself?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah. And by the way, the book that I just read that quote from by Richard Dawkins, peace be upon him, is River Out of Eden, a Darwinian view of life. Okay? Okay? A Charles Darwin, peace be upon him, view of life. Okay? So why all these value judgments? This is just a world of pitiless indifference. Excuse me for botching that. All right? So after all, some people are going to evolve to be kind. Some people are going to evolve not to be kind. So what? It's all just evolution, right?
With a large part of itself, it quite clearly wants us all to die. It wants this world to come to an end. You can tell the yearning for things to be over whenever you read any of its real texts or listen to any of its real, authentic spokesmen, not the sort of the pathetic apologists who sometimes masquerade for it. Those who talk, there was a famous spokesman for this in Virginia until recently, about the rapture.
So basically what he's saying is I'm doing this even though there's no God. Why don't? Because I'm on a crusade. I'm on a path of righteousness. I'm trying to make the world a better place. Better than what? You see what a fraud this guy is? This guy was a drunk. He was a bisexual, and he's a fraud. Okay. The only thing good going for him is he had the gift of gab.
Rapture. Say that those of us who have chosen.
Look at that red face. Gee, I wonder how he got that red face.
Rightly, will be gathered to the arms of Jesus, leaving all of the rest of you behind. If we're in a car, it's your lookout. That car won't have a driver anymore. If we're a pilot, that's your lookout. That plane will crash. You see the hatred he has for Christianity. Yeah, you made a big mistake, didn't you, Christopher Hitchens? You just wasted your whole life, and now you roll the dice, and now you're facing eternity in judgment. Crash. We will be with Jesus, and the rest of you can go straight to hell. The eschatological element that is inseparable from Christianity. If you don't believe that there is to be an apocalypse, there is going to be an end, a separation of the sheep and the goats, a condemnation, final one, then you're not really a believer. And the contempt for the things of this world shows through all of them. It's well put in an old rhyme from an English exclusive brethren sect. It says that we are the pure and chosen few, and all the rest are damned. There's room enough in hell for you. We don't want heaven crammed. You can tell it when you see the extreme Muslims talk. They cannot wait. They cannot wait for death and destruction to overtake and overwhelm the world. They can't wait for a.
Why is that a problem?
Is he just griping and complaining?
Yeah, look, this guy is a little crybaby. At least little babies cry because they don't know any better. Why is this guy whining, complaining, and bitching? Why? In a not God world, all propositions have equal value. There's no right or wrong, right? It's just what is, right? Does everybody's the atheists think that this guy is smart? He's not smart. He's a dumbass. He's an absolute dumbass here. Where are you getting these values from? The answer, he's pulling them out of his butt.
Called, without ambiguity, a final solution. When you look at the Israeli settlers.
That's right. God's going to enact a final solution.
Yeah. Now notice how he's trying to change the subject, right? But don't ever forget this. I'm not trying to smear this man, but everybody knew he had an alcohol problem. Look at how red that face is, right? That is not because he had a green thumb and he likes to be out in the garden a couple hours every day.
paid for often by American tax dollars.
And it's not because he's part Comanche.
Deciding that if they can steal enough land from other people and get all the Jews into the promised land and all the non-Jews out of it, then finally the Jewish people will be worthy of the return.
And so what? So what if a certain subgroup of organisms behaves neurologically in one way and others don't? So what? Where is this moral superiority in a world where there's just molecules in motion and just pitiless indifference, according to your fellow prophet, Richard Dawkins, peace be upon him?
The return of the Messiah. And there are Christians in this country who consider it their job to help this happen.
So what? Is any of that wrong? Or are you just having a little hissy fit because you don't like this? You evolved not to like any of this. So what? Go back to your bottle, drown your sorrows, and then one day you're going to be dead. Oh, that's right, you're dead, right? Now facing judgment day.
Does anybody got a pinky size stick to go with that small violin?
What is this guy whining and bitching and complaining about? Where are you getting these values from? You drunk?
Business of living as humans and studying civilization and trying to acquire learning and knowledge and health.
Well, wait a minute. Knowledge? How can you develop knowledge inductively? You don't know what the grand scheme of things is, right? For all you know, an alien spacecraft could show up next week and say this was a grand practical joke that they were doing, or just a science experiment. Okay? For all you know, what's going on this planet is just simply the science experiment of a teenage alien on some planet far, far away. What a clown this guy is.
Health and medicine and to push back can all be scrapped, and the cult of death can take over. That to me...
Yeah, well, isn't evolution the cult of death? It's a dog-eat-dog world, survival of the fittest. What are you complaining about?
Is a hideous thing in eschatological terms, in end time terms, on its own. A hateful idea, a hateful practice, a hateful theory, but very much to be opposed in our daily lives, where there are people who sincerely mean it, who want to ruin the good relations that could exist between different people.
So what? Who cares about your values? Who cares about your hierarchy of wants and desires? So what?
Nations, races, countries, tribes, ethnicities, who openly say they love death more than we love life, and who are betting that with God on their side, they're right about that. So when I say,
a country with millions of abortions, they love life, right? That's like a life-loving country.
Now, in all fairness, I think he was pro-life. I think he was pro-life. But you see, Western civilization is bloodthirsty too.
Yeah, he mentioned us, meaning the West.
Yeah, right. So he has nothing to crow about when it comes to the West.
Book, but I think religion poisons everything. I'm not just doing what publishers.
Religion poisons everything. Gee, that makes for a great opening line on an atheist greeting card. Okay, religion poisons everything. Okay, well then, what's the natural state? What's the pure state? Atheism? Really? Religion poisons everything? The last time I checked, when we look through the annals of human history, okay, those who were atheists and who got absolute power slaughtered unimaginable numbers of people, starved to death unimaginable numbers of people. And this drunk homosexual wants to moralize about religion poisoning everything when his own compatriots who believed that God was not looking over their shoulders and they slaughtered unimaginable millions of people? What a flaming hypocrite.
Well, maybe what he's saying, because religion is just a systematized worldview, a recorded and systematized worldview. Maybe he's saying that only worldviews that are not systematized are not poison, right? His worldview.
Yeah, religion poisoned everything. This is just atheistic cliches and sloganisms. right?
Well, religion
This
is
is
such a broad term, and there are so many different religions which are even contradictory one to each other. So it's just using very general terms which are not meaningful, I think. Now, Darth, can I ask you something about your yesterday's interaction with?
Yeah. By the way, just to let you know, we did a review of your video with Shannon Q. Duck Lips. You know, the that sinister lady.
He was here when you did it last night. He did another
I know.
one.
We did it again today for other people who didn't hear it. And we were praising you for your composure, your eloquence, and just how the both of them were mental
looks.
cases. Yeah, your good looks, your charm, your debonair.
Sexual appeal.
No, but she was. You know what? She was just a mental case in that video. Absolutely. You know why? It's because you struck a raw nerve. You asked the question precisely, and it exposed their bankruptcy, and that's why she was pissed. And you made her boyfriend look like a fool, and that's why out came the daggers and the claws.
You know, I am a little bit disappointed about myself, because every time I called into the Atheist Experience and talked to Matt Dilla Boasting, or how you call him, happened the same thing.
Dilla Bloviator.
Yeah, Dilla Bloviator. The only time he did not hang up on me was when before they picked up my call, he did a bet and said, I'll bet that at the next call I will not hang up, and if I do hang up, then I will lose $20. And then, unfortunately, it was me on the line. But in every other call,
oh gosh!
But in every other call, it didn't last long until he did hang up on me.
Yeah. That's because you exposed the fraud of their position. You see, Shannon Q. Ducklips and her dopey boyfriend Paul. All right, we're trying to foist this deception that they're not committed. We went back, okay. We went back and we played the video clip. Did we do that last night, Otangelo? We went back and we played the video where she stated categorically. No, we went back to March 11th, where she explicitly stated that she's a hard atheist. But when you spoke to her in August, she's going, "Oh, we're just nobody knows. Nobody knows." Right?
Yeah, that's their tactics. They are like a chameleon. They change their answers depending on the situation. As you say, they are not honest.
Look, she's not as smart as she pretends to be, because when she interacted with me, I said, "What is it that is ultimate?" She goes, "Well, nobody knows that. Nobody knows what's ultimate." And I said, "And how do you know that?" And she immediately folded. Right? When I say, "How do you know that nobody knows what's ultimate? Where'd you get that from?" And she goes, "Oh, okay. Well, maybe somebody does know." I mean, within 2 seconds, I got her to contradict herself. Right?
Since you are touching to that matter, yesterday you asked the same thing to Leo, and he pointed out and said, "Well, what kind of impossibilities to Leo Philius at Speed's channel yesterday night when you went?"
Oh well, that guy clearly had mental problems, so I wasn't going to continue the conversation any further. It wasn't because I met somebody who was my match or something like that. The guy clearly had mental problems.
Yes, but he did ask you a question in regards of impossibilities, which I would like a little bit more elucidation in regards of this. He said, "Well, there are physical and logical impossibilities. What are you referring to?" And you said, "Well, everything metaphysical. It entails everything what we are talking about." But
I'm talking about the whole kit and caboodle. Okay, it doesn't matter that he wants to bifurcate that into logical and physical impossibilities. It makes no difference. I want to know what grounds them both. Right?
Well, Darth was also asking him, "Is there anything singular that institutes all impossibility?" And his response was, if you kind of kind of look at it from his perspective is he's saying, no, there's nothing singular. There's multiple entities that institute what's impossible and what's possible.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he
but the
makes
point,
that
yeah.
differentiation. But to be honest, Darth, it is a difficult question, and it would be fruitful if you would be able to expose what you mean by it, so that people which are not familiar with that concept and these terms can actually understand.
Okay, the reason why I'm asking is simply this. This goes back to the words of Jesus, okay? When Jesus was teaching on the nature of salvation, and he said it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man to get into heaven, they were shocked. What Jesus was talking about is the concept of human richness. He wasn't just talking about personal wealth there, right? And so the apostles were shocked. And they said, who can be saved then, right? And Jesus said, with men, this is impossible, but with God, everything is possible. In other words, that statement means all possibility resides in God. God is the source and the basis and the institutor and sustainer of what's possible and impossible. So when they reject God's disclosure, okay, his revelation of himself, right, then they are being dismissive of what is the ground of all possibility and what instantiates what's impossible. So once they reject that God is and he is the ground of all being, then there's nowhere for them to turn to ground or defend that anything is impossible. Now, do they believe that something's impossible? Well, of course they do. But what's their basis for believing that? Why?
Now,
Nothing.
it's important to note that in order to speak at all, you have to believe that certain things are impossible, because whenever you make any statement, almost every word you speak is an assertion of fact, and then that assertion of fact, you're implicitly invoking the law of non-contradiction when you assert it, and the law of identity, and which would mean that some things have to be impossible.
Yeah.
But
Some things have. Yeah.
I would reference again to what I said in one of my first interactions with you, when I said, well, let's suppose that the universe is eternal and that it had no cause, it just popped up, like they make that case with Lawrence Krauss. Okay? So what that would mean is that there are inside of the universe physical impossibilities, like well, there are many things that we know are physically not possible.
Well, in that scenario, no, there wouldn't be, because why couldn't they just pop into being not impossible?
Well, there are many things that we know are physically not possible.
Well, in that scenario, no, there wouldn't be, because why couldn't they just pop into being not impossible? How come I'm hearing myself?
Well, there are many things that we know are physically not possible.
Hey,
that. My apologies. I went to the YouTube feed, and it's I wasn't using push to talk. Okay, sexy voice, isn't it?
I don't like my voice, and many they make fun of my voice and say that I sound like that character at the Muppet Show. I forgot, Kermit the Frog.
No, Kermit the Frog sounds like this, okay? This is Kermit the Frog, okay? Miss Piggy, all right?
Well, whatever. Well, let's go back to what I was saying.
No, the point is, before you came in, what we were discussing is that the unbelievers have no grounds for any expectations at all, right?
I understand your concept, but I am putting myself into Leophilius' position, and I perfectly understand.
That's fine. I appreciate that. I appreciate that you're doing that. I don't have a problem with that.
So when he says, well, there are logical impossibilities which are distinguished to physical impossibilities, I mean, it is logically impossible to conceptualize a round circle. It is impossible.
Well, the question is, what makes it okay? Now, so what he was trying to do is he was trying to break down that There are certain things that are logically impossible, and there are certain things that are ontologically impossible. Okay, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that bifurcation, but that still is not addressing the issue. But then he said, okay, he said, well, the laws of logic are what make things logically impossible. Well, where do you get these universals from? From where? And I said, where do you get these laws of logic from?
How did he establish that halfway across the universe, an asteroid can't equal itself and its negation?
Yeah,
well, it goes deeper into the question: where do metaphysical concepts like numbers and mathematics and that kind of things come from? Because they are not physical. And I think it was William Lane Craig which said, well, I thought about that for a long time, and I think you can only conceptualize these things in your mind, so that it requires that there is a mind to think about these things in order that we can say they exist, because these things exist in your mind. Outside of your mind, you cannot conceptualize these things.
Okay, sorry, I was distracted. So the real tip-off that I was dealing with a lunatic, okay, is because when he said, well, the laws of logic make certain things logically impossible. And I said, well, where'd you get these universal laws from? Okay, where'd you get this logic from? And he goes, well, what logic are we talking about? Right then and there, that's a dead giveaway that he's a dishonest player.
No, he was asking about that distinction of ontological impossibilities and logical.
It makes no difference. It's not important. It's irrelevant. All right.
And that's not what he was saying. He was saying, well, there's like fuzzy logic and all these other. But you see, he just mentioned logic in his explanation. That's what he was doing. He was asking him about.
I will tell you.
No, he was mentioning the laws of physics, which govern how the physical universe works.
But you see, he can't ground that there are laws, because in order to talk about that there are laws, that there has to be an expectation that they will continue, right?
And that they're universal.
And very good, and that they're not only that they will continue, but that they're in some sense universal. Right? He has no basis for that. When they say laws of nature, well, then first of all, are each individual law, okay, are they eternal themselves? Right? Look, these people listen. Let me just finish. These people just want to throw out the laws of nature are eternal because it's just a vague notion. But when we start to unpack what they're saying, it starts to crumble like a house of cards. Okay, they cannot defend that there's a plurality of individual, unconcretely unified laws that are eternal.
Yeah, they try to use it as a verbal stumbling block for us, but you can see right through it. It doesn't work.
You know,
all right, so let's get back. We're almost done with this video. We have 3 more minutes. I just want to get back to the late great alcoholic Christopher Hitchens. Voice activity. Okay.
Which is like, and coming up with a provocative subtitle. I mean to say it infects us.
Did you stop streaming it on purpose?
Most basic integrity.
No, accident. Hold on. Okay.
Says we can't be moral without Big Brother, without a totalitarian permission. It means we can't.
Now, notice this psychotic description of God, okay? We can't be moral without totalitarian permission. He's trying to castigate God as being, quote, totalitarian, okay? Now, here's a guy who is for much of his adult life, a drunk, an alcoholic, right? And it's too bad that more people didn't bring this out. Maybe they didn't because they might think it's an ad hominem. But this is a part of his outlook. Okay, I mean, his morality. Okay, his being a drunk, an alcoholic, it dictates his philosophy. Well, of course, somebody who's a drunk in his life, in his adult life, doesn't want there to be a God, right?
Yeah, the Christian perspective is that morality is rooted in the very character and nature of God, and we, being made in His image, reflect His moral essence when we do moral things. It's not as if God is arbitrarily given commands that are called morality, and we have to listen to some dude arbitrarily giving commands. That is not the right conception of God.
Why is it that the unbelievers are denying God? Okay. Why don't they want to acknowledge God? Because the moment they do, it brings the conviction of sin and guilt that they're a creature, right? And they know right away that they are at odds with their creator, right? So this is why I say all the time, these people are not motivated by intellect. They are not motivated by reasoning. This is why evidentialism will fail, because these people are not motivated by reason and evidence. They are motivated. They do not want there to be a God, and they will collect any catchphrase, any cliche, any slogan, and spew it in order to protect their little idol. And their idol is their own mental autonomy. Okay, it's that simple.
Can't be good to one another. Because we can't think without this. We must be afraid. We must also be forced to love someone who we fear. The essence of sadomasochism.
Okay, this is another psychotic misrepresentation, okay, of the God of the Bible. Okay, he refers to it as sadomasochism. We're being forced to love somebody that we fear. Okay. This guy, either he's a drunk moron, or he's deliberately misrepresenting the God of the Bible. He is so blinded by his hatred of the God of the Bible that he's so emotionally crippled that he cannot see the forest for the trees, that he is misrepresenting the God of the Bible. So, like, for example, every time we hear an unbeliever talking about, oh, well, if you don't believe, God's going to torture you forever. No, it's not torture. Okay? Torture is the infliction of physical or mental or emotional pain or anguish for the purposes of soliciting cooperation, or for the personal satisfaction of watching somebody be in anguish. Okay? That is not what the Bible presents. Right? So Christopher Hitchens is a liar, an absolute liar.
Like I said, it's the opposite. God takes no pleasure in the death of the wicked.
And that knows that death is coming.
Yes, Fake, you have an open mic?
Oh, I was just gonna say with torture, another definition was the action or practice of inflicting severe pain or suffering on someone as a punishment. So it could be torture under that definition.
No.
Continue.
No, that's incorrect. Okay, a punishment. Somebody could punish with physical pain, but if it's not for the purpose, like what I just said, under that condition, it would be for the purpose of either the mental or emotional satisfaction of the inflictor.
That usage of the word is not one that people would commonly.
Right.
You wouldn't call it torture if someone's being justly punished as a form of justice. You wouldn't say, "Oh, it's torture," because it's physical in nature.
Right. Okay. So, for example, there might
not
be
just physical. There's also mental torture too. By that definition, putting people behind bars because they don't want to be there would be torture too.
Okay. So, Fake. Let's say we had an example. Let's say we have a hypothetical monarch in some Asian country, right? And suppose this monarch in an Asian country they make a law that if you traffic in drugs, right, of a certain quantity, your back will be beaten by caning, right? And it is for the purpose of punishment and inflicting pain, right? Not for the purposes of soliciting cooperation, nor is it inflicted for the purposes of gaining emotional delight, okay, by the inflictor, but as a just sentence, okay, for the crime committed, and to be a deterrent to those who might plot to engage in that. But suppose we had a different scenario where we had the same monarch, and he decided that somebody out on the sidewalk criticizes the way he's running the government, right? But he hasn't broken any law in criticizing the king, and the king commands that he be arrested. And because he hasn't broken any law, he decides, okay, cane him. And he's just doing it for his own emotional satisfaction because he's been publicly criticized while not breaking the law. Okay? So the biblical punishment cannot conceivably be categorized as torture. Okay? This is simply patently absurd, right? And we shouldn't be surprised that when atheists use this type of language, it's because they're bastardizing the biblical worldview. They're bastardizing and misrepresenting the biblical text. Why shouldn't we be surprised when Christopher Hitchens, being an alcoholic, would talk this way? Okay? The guy's an alcoholic. He's a drunk. Right?
And can't wait to bring it on. I say this is evil.
Wait a minute. How can you say evil? Where do you get evil in an atheist world? Okay, let me read this.
Well, when he says evil, he just means it doesn't conform to his preferences.
So, Fake, I want you to listen to this. Okay, this is his fellow prophet Richard Dawkins, peace be upon him. Okay, this is from A Darwinian View of Life by Richard Dawkins. Now remember, he's a fellow atheist prophet along with Christopher Hitchens. He says here, the universe that we observe, okay, let me go back here. He says, let's see, in a universe of electrons and selfish genes, blind physical forces, okay, and genetic replication, some people are going to get hurt, other people are going to get lucky, and you won't find any rhyme or reason, any bottom at bottom, no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but pitiless indifference. So how could anything be evil in a world where there's no God? Okay? Now, how can God be evil? Right? It is a logical incoherency to say that God can commit evil. Are you aware of that, Fake?
If evil is that which goes against God's nature, then yes, I would agree. That's impossible
Yeah.
to call God evil.
That's right. So, but by definition, God cannot commit evil.
Well, that's because they're bastardizing the term evil, Darth. They mean it just
Of
doesn't
course.
conform to their preferences.
Yeah.
So when they say God's committing evil, all they're saying is, well, God's not conforming to my preferences.
Right. And by the way, what he's calling evil is coming from a megalomaniac attitude about himself. In other words, his attitude is, if I was God, I would not run creation this way. I would run creation differently. Right? That's psychotic. That's megalomania. Given his limited knowledge of the world, right? How can he make such universal judgments given his limited knowledge? This is megalomania. Okay. Now, when I say he's a megalomaniac, I'm not saying that he's the king of the world. But what he is saying is, if your God were real, then my little puny little human mind would overrule that God as being good, and that what is evil is what does not conform to how the world would run and operate were I to be God. Okay? This guy is a psycho megalomaniac, right?
And though I do some nights stay home, I enjoy more the nights when I go out and fight against this ultimate wickedness and ultimate stupidity.
Ultimate wickedness. How can there be wickedness in a not God world? Because whatever is happening, whatever anyone is thinking, whatever anyone is choosing to do, it simply is just what it is. There's no rhyme or reason why anything happens. Stuff just happens. Sometimes people rescue a drowning child, and other times people just kill somebody because they're a serial killer. There's no rhyme or reason why anything happens.
Gotta
Okay?
love that he picks that theological laden terminology like wicked. Gotta love that as an atheist. Right?
This, Dawkins writes the book The God Delusion. We should talk about the Christopher Hitchens delusion, where he thinks that there can be actual evil and wickedness in a not God world. This is the Hitchens delusion, right? I mean, these people are mental cases.
Stupidity. Thank you.
And you know what's funny? The guy who did this YouTube video, he actually thinks this is good stuff. This is how deluded these people are. He actually thinks it's good stuff.
Faco, as an atheist, do you think people like this are really rational as they say they are?
And you know what? Shame on Frank Turek. Okay, you can see to the right of the screen. There, Frank Turek is sitting there and he's clapping. Why would you be clapping to that psychotic screed by that drunk Christopher Hitchens? Why? Frank Turek should not have applauded to that.
These are supposed to be like the giants of atheism. Do you really believe that these people are rational?
Look! Shame on Frank Turek and everyone there who is a believer. You could, if you might applaud at the end and just say thank for the speakers for coming to show appreciation, to hear an extreme point of view, but they shouldn't be applauding over that megalomaniac screed.
Then I'll give you one final thought experiment. This is what you have to believe.
Yeah, well, your final thought experiment is now. You are in Hades. You are awaiting Judgment Day, right? And you no longer can rationalize to yourself that there is no God, right? And you're going to be forever separated from God. So much for your final thoughts.
Believe now.
Final thought, like who are you, Jerry Springer?
Yeah.
Because we now know things we didn't used to know. We know that the human species.
Here we go again. Here we go with more bullshit. We now know things. We now know things that we didn't know used to know. We know that our species. You see what a throbbing hard-on he has for evolution. Okay. Right. See what he's saying is we know because evolution. Excuse the graphic metaphor there, but I think it fits the situation. Just because the theory of evolution is dogma throughout academia, it doesn't guarantee that we know that it is true, right? So what he's calling is a devoutly held belief as he knows it.
Could be as much as 200,000 years ago. Did it become separate from the Cro-Magnons and the rival prehuman species?
You see, what he doesn't even understand is the so-called Cro-Magnon fossils, okay? The view on anthropologists now, not that I agree with these evolutionary anthropologists, but they now view that there's no difference between fossils, what are called Cro-Magnon, and modern human beings, right? But they love throwing around that evolutionary anthropological nomenclature, don't they? Doesn't it sound scientific? Cro-Magnon man, Neanderthal, right? Isn't that great?
Could be as little as 100. Richard Dawkins thinks 200,000. Francis Collins, who did the Human Genome Project, who's, by the way, C.S. Lewis kind of Christian, thinks 100,000. All right, I'll take 100. Here's what you have to believe. For 100,000 years, humans are born as a primate species.
See, here we go again with prejudicial and ignorant conjecture. All he's simply doing is he's simply telling us his creation story. So what? So what if you believe that?
Great atheist bomb drops. Is this the best this guy can find?
Oh, no. But they love this. Okay.
Expectation of life, what, 25 years for the first few 100,000 years? First few tens of thousands of years. Infant mortality, rife. Microorganism disease, terrifying. Earthquakes, volcanoes, extraordinary.
Lions and tigers and bears, oh my.
I was actually going to say that exact
tigers and bears, oh my. Don't you love the storytelling? Don't you love the verbal dramatics? Trying to whip up all of this horrible stuff.
And fights over land, over territory, over food, over women, over tribalism.
You know, why couldn't they all have been sensible and be like me and just be a drunkard my whole adult life and just rail against the cosmic boogeyman? And we all could have gotten along together if we're all alcoholic atheists like me.
Frightening too. For 95, 96,000 years, heaven watches this. With folded arms, with indifference, with coldness.
Whoa. Where'd you get that from?
Coldness,
Wait a minute.
indifference.
Indifference and coldness? Maybe God is allowing humanity.
He's motive mining. He's motive mining about God.
Motive mining. There we go again. There's Tonlock's new phrase. Tonlock gets all the credit. He's motive mining with coldness and indifference. Why? Because God is not running his plan of creation the way your genius alcoholic mind, the way your genius alcoholic mind would have run the course of human history. This is how psychotic this guy is, and people took this guy seriously. They still do take this guy seriously. Okay, heaven looks upon with coldness and indifference, right? This guy is unbelievable.
And then around 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, but only in really barbaric, illiterate parts of the Middle East. Not in China or where people can read or think or do science. No. In barbaric, illiterate, backward parts of the Middle East, it's decided we can't let this go on, we better intervene. And what better way than by human sacrifice?
By the way, and again, this is a complete bastardization and a complete lie. He is completely misrepresenting what the Old Testament details, okay?
Sacrifices and plagues and mass murder. And if that doesn't make them behave morally, we just don't know what does. If there is a single person in this room who can bring themselves to believe anything remotely like that, they convict themselves of being, first, very stupid, and second, very immoral. And
here we go again. Here we go with his values.
They very much don't conform to his preferences.
He says stuff like that as opposed to the opposite of that. What would that be?
So Christopher Hitchens said, it's wicked, it's immoral, because it's not how the alcoholic drunk Christopher Hitchens, would have run the plan of creation. The alcoholic red-faced Christopher Hitchens, would have run the world in a better way.
That's not how I like it.
And you know what's interesting? God was gracious to him. He knew quite a long time before he kicked the bucket that he was going.
Maybe change the lyrics to that famous song. That's the way. I would like it.
Yeah. And you know what? As far as we know, okay, I use that loosely, he went to his deathbed defiant against God. Guess what, buddy? You made your bed. Now you're going to sleep in it.
For eternity, baby.
Yeah. You want to sit there? You want to give God the middle fingers and claim you're smarter than God? God is not mocked, right? But what does the New Testament say? God is not mocked. What a man sows, he will reap. Okay, and you're gonna rebel against God. You're gonna proclaim that you're smarter than God. Good. You are going to reap separation from the God that you hate. And you can stew in your own alcoholic hatred of God, in your own juices, forever. Sayonara, Christopher Hitchens. Enjoy eternal punishment. And that wraps up our greatest atheist bombs.
No, he just was given what he wanted.
Yep. Well, there's only one live show on atheism right now, and that is this room. There's nothing else on except for David Wood Live.
These atheists are the one that talk about a world of darkness, a world of nothingness, and pretty much endless, pointlessness. Well, that's precisely what you get in hell.
What a clown that guy was. Hey, Archangel, you got an open mic. All right.
He's been told about that multiple times. I don't know why he keeps doing it. These people are the giants of atheism. I don't know how any atheist could take these guys seriously.
Yeah, they're pathetic.
I still to this day haven't heard one rational argument for atheism, not one.
Okay, pray with me. Our Father in heaven, we're so grateful for just these big, heavy. Use it as a self-defense weapon. Should I run into anything? A religion, because it takes a very strong stance about the existence of God, namely that he doesn't exist. And so then what happens is
I'm just perusing the past atheist videos to see if there's anything we can go over.
Okay, so guys, atheist.
Like I told you, these are teenagers trapped in adult bodies. You know, Christopher Hitchens' rationale and reasonings are not at any more of a sophisticated level than that of a angry teenager who hates and doesn't believe in God.
I think that Christopher Hitchens was never sophisticated philosophically in regards of bringing up to the table some new kind of criticism of the theistic worldview. He's just verbose.
Yeah, pretty much.
Christopher Hitchens, the angry drunk.
Yeah.
Haven't you guys noticed like a really common like occurrence with all these atheists? They're all just so angry and bitter inside. Like I've never met a happy atheist. They're always militantly like angry, like just perpetually.
Well, most of them, in my view, okay, the ones that we encounter on the internet, the ones that we see on YouTube, it's my belief, right, that most or many of them are doing this out of a vicarious attempt to get even with their loved ones. Oh, okay, you're gonna indoctrinate me. Good. I'm gonna go out on a crusade against theism and Christianity. Okay.
Yeah, I saw that I saw that when I was a kid. There was this one girl that I really got to know in like marching band and stuff like that, and she was just a militant atheist. And I found out that her family growing up was devoutly religious. Like she grew up going to church and stuff, and then once she was able, just complete and total crusade against God. And I feel I've seen that happen in my own life with.
And the reason why is they want to be free to live their life as they choose without contemplating the thought that God is looking over their shoulder. Okay? This is what it's all about, folks. Right? And no, I'm not doing a psychobabble psychoanalysis. This comes directly out of Scripture. Okay?
They are just in a rebellious state. And I think a true atheist is someone which simply doesn't care about the God question at all and lives his life and pursues his own interests without considering if God exists or not. He goes on just putting himself and his desires in the center of the universe, his nose basically being the center of the universe, and that's it. I mean, these guys which you see militantly and outspokenly advocating for materialism and naturalism and against God, these are just in suppressing the truth, as Romans 1 says, and in a rebellious state against God. And they are probably more believers in God than we are. And they are just in rebellion.
Tonko, have you seen my 4-minute encounter with famous atheist Massimo Pilucci?
I have not. I watched. I think I watched the one with you and Shannon last night.
Shannon Q. Duck Lips. Yeah,
that was a trip.
Well, you should see her. Well, interestingly enough, it wasn't specific to me. It wasn't a clash of personalities. It's because she knew that I was going to get to the root of the problem. Guess what she did? She did the same crap. It's the same kind of vicious attack that she did to Otangelo. If you look up on the screen where the guy's name says Otangelo, he's from Brazil. And if you here, I'll give you the link.
I think you showed it yesterday.
Okay, did you see that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Which shows you this is not the rantings of an intelligent woman. This is the rantings and the verbal attack and antics of somebody who's emotionally driven in their hatred toward the idea that there's a God. Okay.
Yeah. I don't think she's a bitch. I think she behaves like a witch.
Oh, worse than that. Okay, that's an insult to witches, right? Because the witches are not trying to present themselves as being on an intellectual journey. That like I told you, she has an email address called raise. What was it? It's called raise the. Hold on a second. Let me just find it. Okay.
Elevate the discourse.
Thank you. Yeah. See, I'm having another Joe Biden moment. Elevate the discourse. Right. Elevate the discourse. Now, when she was dialoguing with me, was she elevating the discourse? No. Look at how she atrociously treated Otangelo. Right. Was that elevating the discourse? No. Look, as long as you are not touching on certain subject matters that exposes the fraudulentness of their atheists, as long as you play their little game of evidentialism, they're going to love you. They're going to love you to death. But you'll notice when Otangelo was speaking in his opening question, he wasn't doing a frontal assault with biblical presuppositional reasoning. And you can see that at the end, he starts talking about using abductive reasoning and making an appeal to the Kalam cosmological argument. But it's because his question was so good, right? And it was so circumspect, she thought he was doing a presuppositional attack.
Yeah, I am learning with you, Darth, because I am still not familiar with your approach. But I really
read that book I sent you, Every Thought Captive. Start there. And then I have a couple of more easy to read books for you, and you'll pick it up. Biblical presuppositionalism is not hard at all. It's actually quite simple, but it's counterintuitive to the normal ways that people. When I say normal, I put that in quotation marks. The typical ways that people think like unbelievers. Okay.
But I am trying still to break down what you always bring up in regard of what is possible and impossible. It is an interesting thought, but I think in order to reach out to an atheist where he is, maybe you need to break down a little bit more what you mean by that in order that they really understand.
Okay, I want to know when they believe that God is not necessary. What they're actually saying is God as eternal creator who then institutes, implements, and secures the way things operate, right? Then you just don't, you as an atheist, you don't get to surgically remove God from his creation and then just say, well, things operate the way they would without God, right? I have actually had atheists say that, right? How would the world be any different without God? I say, good. Explain to me your world from the ground up without God. And they can't do it.
I had a long dispute, Darth, with Leophilius in regards of the laws of physics. And I always insist, yes, the laws of physics, we discover and describe them, but they have also to be prescribed by a creator. And he always insists, no, they just are. And you see, that is the line of reasoning
then just say, well, then God just is.
He's violating his own criterion of belief.
So then they will say, yeah, well, we use Occam's razor. God is not necessary.
No, Occam's razor is not determinative. Occam's razor is simply a preferential tool. In English, it's called a heuristic device. It's simply heuristic devices are used to quickly communicate or understand something. Okay, Occam's razor is just simply preferential. It's not determinative. Occam's razor does not produce logically necessitated conclusions.
Yeah, they say it's just one more complicating factor. And as we said,
no, it's not one more complicated factor at all. Because you see, they are mischaracterizing the position here, right? Right? The reason why the reason why they're saying it's complicating the picture is because they are, you and I and other believers, all right, are not, we're not on the same wavelength with them, because when we talk about God, we are talking about the creator-creature distinction, where we have eternal God. God is the ground of all being. God is the only thing that is absolute and self-contained and unconditionally non-dependent. Anything else began to exist, and it depends and derives on God, right? So from that perspective, what we have is, what is fundamental to reality is a mind. That mind then institutes stuff that is not itself. Now, when they reject that, they are simply adopting that what is fundamental is not a mind, and all of the stuff out there just simply either is or arises from what is fundamentally not a mind, right? That's the proper scenario that they have. But the scenario that they want you to adopt, okay, is that we have the Christian worldview, okay, where we have laws of logic, we have causality, we have laws of nature. Things operate in a certain way. We have human intelligibility. And then they want to surgically remove God and just saying, oh, well, you're complicating things by adding God. God is an addition that is not necessary. Okay? So no wonder they're postulating Occam's razor here. But the point is, that's not the scenario. They don't get to talk about a world of order, right? Okay? Now, so here's food for thought, right? In a world where nothing changes, there could be human intelligibility, right? In a world where nothing changes, there couldn't be human intelligibility or human predication. In a world where everything changes, there couldn't be human intelligibility or predication. So what kind of world are we going to need? Okay. Now, granted, we're presupposing that God is the starting point, but the world that he creates must be a combination of what we call the principle of continuity and the principle of discontinuity, that there is a mixture of continuity and discontinuity. And because of those principles that are intertwined within creation, and because of other parameters that God has imposed, that we can then have human intelligibility. But where do they get the principle of continuity and discontinuity from? What imposes it? What secures it? Right? So when I talk about what's impossible, I want to know, what is it that's fundamental that according to them is not a mind that will then dictate why anything is, can be, or cannot be? Let me repeat that again. When they dismiss that God has revealed himself as the creator, as the sovereign Lord, right? Then what is it that is fundamental within their system that dictates, and memorize this, Otangelo, what is it that is fundamental that dictates or institutes what is, what can be, and what cannot be?
Okay, if I
Well,
would be an
institutes
atheist,
it and secures it.
let me respond to that. I think it's important. If I would be an atheist, then I would say it is possible that virtual particles instantiated the universe.
They can't say what's possible.
No,
unless
no,
they
you
tell
don't.
us what instantiates what's possible.
Okay,
But they
okay.
would-
In
they-
order
they would
to
say
say,
that-
in order to say what's possible, you're going to have to start at square one as to what is it that's fundamental. Because if they say, well, nothing is fundamental, they have now cut their own throat. Okay?
I will not start with that. Of course, you have to.
I don't
bring
care
that
if they don't
concept
start
in-
with it. No, you're not understanding. If you don't start with God, you don't get to get in the driver's seat. Okay?
If they
If
don't
you're-
start
listen-
with what's ultimate, then they can't tell us what's possible, right?
Listen to me. Imagine you get pulled over by a police officer, or somebody gets pulled over by a cop, and the cop does a field sobriety test, and the cop discerns that that person is intoxicated, and then the person pulls out their keys and tries to get back in their car, and the cop goes, "You're not going anywhere." And you go, "What are you talking about, officer?" "No, you're not getting in and driving away, because the ingredient that you need to drive away is sobriety, and that ain't going to happen. Without God, okay, you don't have the essential necessary ingredient to talk about anything." Now, they think that this is patently absurd, because they say to themselves, well, I believe in a world that operates according to God. Yeah, that's their fantasy. How do they ground that? Lawrence Krauss says, well, we don't need God. We can explain our world through natural laws. Oh, really? Good. Tell me about that. What is it that's ultimate, Dr. Krauss, that would impose these laws without God? He goes, he goes, I don't know. And he goes, why does there even need to be? So because then why are you talking about laws of nature?
Well, then you wouldn't be sustaining that you can explain the world without God. If
No.
you can't tell us what's ultimate.
You would just be asserting things as brute facts. Okay? Now, I want you to make a mental note of this, Otangelo. Okay? In God's world, the God of the Bible, there are no brute facts. Everything is instituted and secured as a part of God's creation and his redemptive plan of human history. So there are no brute facts. Okay? Now, there might be a particular state of affairs that I am baffled by, but I know that ultimately that whatever it is, it's in operation within God's world. Okay? But for the unbeliever, all they have left to resort to as the final recourse of explanation are brute facts. There's no rhyme or reason why anything is, can be, or cannot be. All right? So this is why, and they think that this is they actually think, and this is the reason why they have such disgust and contempt for biblical presuppositionalism. They do not have this same contempt and disgust for evidentialists and classical apologists, because they can bamboozle those two groups of people, the classicalists and the evidentialists, by simply just going, oh, I'm unconvinced. But But you can't do that to the biblical presuppositionalist. You can't even say to the biblical presuppositionalist, I doubt Jesus walked on water. Because in order to doubt something, there has to be a model of reality that provides the grounds of rational inquiry. But they cannot ground anything metaphysically so that there would be reason to doubt something or anything. In a not God world, what grounds would you have to doubt anything? The answer is you wouldn't.
They will just dodge this issue. And
exactly. And that's what that slimy broad did to you back in August.
If you're having a conversation with someone that's rational and they've decided to not engage rationally with the conversation, then there's nothing you can do, Otangelo. All you can do is point out you're not engaging rationally and end the conversation.
Well, that's what happens.
That's why I stopped. That's why I stopped talking with that Leo guy on that atheist feed yesterday, because he clearly was mentally disturbed. He did not know how to have an adult back and forth conversation. That's why I said to him, how old are you? Because I expected him to say that he was 16, but he claimed he was 25.
Yeah, but I think, you didn't address the distinction which he made between ontological possibilities and logical possibilities.
I was going to, and so I was taking the first part of his bifurcation, which were the laws of logic. But I said, where did you get that these laws are imposed and are universal? And then he goes, well, what logic? What this guy is, what he was doing is he was just habituated to being argumentative. Okay, I don't mind vigorously debating with people, but when you're dealing with somebody who the only thing they know how to do is the habituation of being argumentative, there's no point in continuing the interaction because there's not a dialogue going on. Okay, you see, maybe because I've had more experience in dealing with these people than you have. I don't mean to throw you under the bus, but I've had far more experience and a long history of these people acting in just utterly deceptive and deceitful ways, right? And I just don't put up with it anymore.
So I see it more like, there will be a judgment. And one day when they will arrive to Judgment Day, they will not be able to justify their unbelief by saying that they did not have opportunity to actually know the truth. And we are instruments in God's hand. And even if we are not fruitful today, and if they are not acknowledging what we are saying, but they will not have a way to excuse and justify them and say, well, we didn't know.
Romans 1:20 says that by all creation, man has no excuse anyway. From the beginning, there is no excuse. Not one.
And by the way, the word excuse there in the Greek literally means he has no intellectual, philosophical, or legal defense. That's what it means.
And it will be worse for them because they have so much scientific evidence as never in human history before it was available, and they deny it.
Doesn't that show you the power of the cravenness of the sinful human nature that is in a death hug with their human autonomy? Okay,
it's all what it is.
Yeah, they're embracing of their human autonomy is a death hug. It's going to plunge them into eternal damnation, right? And you see, biblical presuppositionalism is the only way that we can break through the psychological self-defense, the self-deceptive mechanisms in their faulty reasoning. It's the only way.
But you have to go where they are today because they are not, as I am not familiar with.
You have to go where they are. No, you're not understanding. Listen, there's a time and a place to use certain reasonings, like appeal to evidences. We are not against evidences or using philosophical reasoning, but those evidences and philosophical reasonings must not do two things, okay? We must not compromise in that presentation on any fundamental teaching of Scripture, nor must we capitulate to any false beliefs that the unbeliever has, and that includes their autonomous reasoning. Okay, autonomous reasoning is that the mind of man, through an inductive process, by collecting the facts and organizing them and trying to discern general principles, universals, categories, can come to an understanding of the world around him. Okay, that is fallacious, okay, from God's point of view, right? The reason why we have these categories is because God has made us to think this way in his world, right? If we start with man being autonomous, that the mind of man can discern the world around him, can discern facts and the relationships from one fact to another, and that what those facts are with respect to a wide variety of facts that surround them, if without reference to God. Okay? Now the Bible says you can't. God says every fact must be understood and seen in the light that the fact is what it is because we are in God's hand. We are within God's control, within his plan. Because if it is not, then all we have left is metaphysical chaos. We have metaphysical absurdity. You can't say anything means anything. And the reason why they don't believe that is because they haven't taken the time to examine their metaphysic, to trace it to its origin, but their origin could never be identified. Okay, so Van Til says that brute facts are mute facts. In other words, they don't tell us about why anything is, okay? Now, they claim that they have some knowledge and they're learning more about the world, when in fact they have no knowledge at all because they don't know what anything means. It doesn't matter that they have predictive capability without fail. Okay, it doesn't matter. They're just whistling past the graveyard when they appeal to predictive capability, right? So unless a fact or a series of facts is what it is, starting in the mind of God and implemented within God's plan of creation, then we have no facts at all. Because in order to claim that something's a fact, you're going to have to appeal to at least directly or indirectly the uniformity of nature. You're going to have to make an appeal to the causal principle. You're going to have to make an appeal to laws of logic. You're going to have to make an appeal either directly or indirectly, more likely implicitly, to that the human cognition at its basic level is operating properly. How do you have properly
as brute facts, but how can they do it?
No, then if it's a brute fact, it doesn't mean anything. But they're not using the word brute fact in the way that we're using it. When we talk about brute fact, is that there is no ultimate rhyme or reason why anything is. It just is. Okay? So when they talk about the laws of nature, okay, they're blowing smoke, they're bluffing. What laws of nature? In order for there to be laws of nature, there must be something in reality, in their model of reality, that imposes and secures laws of nature. Okay? There must be something that keeps it in perpetuity, right? Right? Look, suppose we talked about the laws of the internet, right? But then all of a sudden you go to connect, you can't connect to the internet because your ISP is down. Well, what's imposing the back and forth transmission of data? Okay? Their go-to response is to say that the laws of nature are eternal. But this is a problem, okay? Because then these laws are plural. There's nothing concretely unifying and imposing that unity in terms of that plurality. So each of the members of the set of the plurality of the laws of nature just simply exist independent of each other. And the way these laws, these so-called laws, happen over time, there's no rational justification to expect that they will continue.
there is an interesting thought because there are several different laws of physics. I was just thinking now where you were talking. Well, what happens if we have the entire set of physical laws? Let's suppose there are 5 of them, and one would not be existent, like the laws of gravity, for example. There would
Let me just interrupt here.
universe.
Otangelo, do you know what the heat death of the universe is?
Yes.
Okay. In a thought experiment, way off into the future, outside of the Christian worldview, most unbelievers will acknowledge the heat death of the universe. Okay? Unless they want to try to posit that there is a cyclical expansion and crunch or whatever, or they're going to mystically try to say, what does it. But most of these unbelievers will acknowledge the heat death of the universe. Well, once the heat death of the universe occurs, there will no longer be any order. There won't be anything interacting. There will be no laws to speak of. Okay?
And you would say that
the point is
the
this.
laws break down.
So Otangelo, listen. Down in Texas, they had a freak snowstorm like they've never had before. Oops, what happened to the regularity there? The fact that there has been a consistency of an experience without exception over a period of time is not a guarantee, nor is it logically necessitated that tomorrow will be like yesterday.
In other words,
So
you
for
can't
all-
say something's a law unless you, rationally, you can't say it unless you can tell us what's sustaining and securing it.
Yeah,
What's the reason for it that it's a law?
In order for it to be a law, something must institute it and something must sustain it. We call that do you know the English word in perpetuity? Right? It
No.
means in perpetuity means it just continues without stopping.
If it simply exists for no reason, with nothing instituting and securing it, then why can't it just end tomorrow? What would prevent that?
What? Yeah. All we say to unbelievers, say, oh, okay. So are these laws of nature? Ask these people, will these laws of nature that you refer to, that are eternal, will they continue unending into the future without ever changing?
Good point.
Now, if they say, I don't know, so then they just shot themselves in the head. Because then what they've just done is they've cut their own head off because now they don't have a reason that it will continue tomorrow.
See, when they say they're laws, there's two things that they're saying. They're saying they're universal, which means they're true everywhere, but they're also true at all times, meaning they will not, or that they won't end just for no reason.
Yeah. What they're saying is they're not just pointing. The laws of nature are not merely an appeal to past consistency, but it's an appeal to past consistency with the expectation that it will continue.
Because you wouldn't call, like, if your mom served you oatmeal, every morning for the first 18 years of your life, you wouldn't call that a law, right?
The law of mom's oatmeal.
Because you'd expect it to end at some point.
Right. So the point
that's
is simply
a great
this.
point. A great point, Darth. I love.
So the point is this. The point is this: is that the uniformity of nature, laws of nature, can only find grounding and intelligibility in the mind of God first. And I'm not being funny here. It has to start in the mind of God, and then it is executed. It is implemented in God's redemptive plan of human history. Now, when they reject that, okay, they don't get to adopt the parameters of the Christian worldview and surgically remove God and say, well, I don't need God. When they talk about laws of nature, say, I want to know is, what is it that institutes and secures these laws? And notice these words, institute and secures. Now, why do I ask that question? Because they're rejecting the creator-creature distinction. It is God who institutes creation. It is God who sustains creation. It is God who institutes the regularity. It is God who sustains the regularity. Now,
The Bible
if they
says
just
all things are upheld by the power of his will. He sustains
That's right.
them.
By the power of his word. Okay. It talks about the Lord has instituted. Yeah.
It comes down to the question: why are there physical laws at all? They could simply not exist.
No, the point is they cannot defend. They're bluffing. Okay, they're bluffing. They cannot defend anything that they say. But the mistake that Christian apologists have done is try to beat them on their own territory, on their rules.
And one thing to note, now that you're understanding that they can't defend that there's laws, they also can't defend any proposition they assert that depends on laws, which means classes and categories. So if they say there's an apple on the table, an apple is a class, but classes only exist because of laws. So they can't defend that apples exist.
This is why I feel like it's so important to have biblical literacy, because if you know the genuine article, you know the fake when they come up.
Exactly. This is what Van Til pounded home. The creator-creature distinction, it's in Genesis 1. Okay? It runs all throughout the Bible, all the way up until Revelation 22. The creator-creature distinction.
I think, Darth, you need to nail down more in that what you just said, which I think this stream is really crucial for me to get closer to understand what you're talking about.
Okay, well, read the book, Every Thought Captive.
I read the first 100 pages.
Okay, when you get done, I have a few more easy reading books for you, and it will drive home the bit. See, look. For many years, I reasoned like your typical classical or a evidentialist. Okay, and you know why I was doing it? Because I'm thinking like unbelievers here. Well, I've got a reason in a way that they're going to accept. Then the light clicked on in my head when I realized, no, I don't. I need to reason with the unbeliever that is faithful to what God has revealed. And when we're faithful to what God has revealed and we use the sword of the Spirit, we use the truth that God has revealed, the unbeliever cannot argue against it.
It's just like the Apostle Paul when he went to go reason with the Jews about Christ. He didn't use, pagan philosophy. He used their own scripture and reasoned Christ with the Old Testament. He didn't try and we can't meet them where they're at. We have to use what we have and
I think the crux of the issue here is to make them understand that you are not playing based on their rules, but you are introducing a concept which is at the moment that you talk to them strange to them. But in order that they start to understand what you're saying,
here's what we need to do.
You require to break it down.
What we do is what we're revealing to them.
They don't want to understand it. They don't want to understand it.
What we need to do is we need to explain to them what the Christian worldview really means down at the nitty-gritty. Why do you think it is they hate it? Listen. Why do you think they hate it when I bring up terms like ultimacy of reality or what is fundamental to reality? Why do you think that Lawrence Krauss got ticked? Why do you think he was pissed that I brought that up? Why do you think the rest of these atheist philosophers that I've encountered over the last couple of weeks on these AMA, why do you think they were pissed? Because I'm getting down to brass tacks. I'm getting down to the nitty-gritty of the Christian worldview versus their counterfeit challenge, because they cannot defend it, okay?
Many cannot defend it, Darth, because they do not understand what you are saying. And I am saying that because I also have difficulty.
No, let me disagree with you. They don't want to understand.
Maybe.
You realize that even if they did understand, they couldn't defend it.
I would not accept it, but that's not my point. What I am saying is that I, as a Christian, have had difficulties to understand your concepts.
I did too, and that's because
Antangelo, listen to me. Listen to me. You do understand it. You just need to focus and reinforce it. You did it in your opening question. You perfectly hit them with a presuppositional line of questioning.
Well, I will mention that when I first started hearing the presuppositional reasonings, I struggled with them at first a bit too, because I was so used to reasoning like the world. But once I started becoming accustomed to it, it actually transformed in many ways the way I understand scriptures. Like where I forget what verse, but it says the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. Completely
Proverbs.
changed how I understood that. And where it says the fool has said in his heart there is no God. Well, I thought that, way back in the day, I thought that was just like a pejorative, like, oh, they're just dumb, But now I understand, what is a fool other than someone who
By the
doesn't
way,
have a
who is
reason
snoring
for
into
anything
their
they say.
microphone?
Archangel.
Oh gosh. All right, I've had to mute him several times. All right, I got to take a break, guys. I'll try to be back in a short while, but yeah.
Do you think
See,
he's
by
actually
the way,
asleep at his mic?
Tonlock used to fall asleep on the microphone. Remember Tonlock?
Yeah, but ever since you started these reviews, he stopped falling asleep,
Yeah.
Darth.
But by the way, even though we aren't having a lot of atheists coming in, they're noticing that night after night, this room is getting packed out. Okay, that the room is solidly packed out. They're taking notice. Okay, I don't care if they don't attend. Right. All right.
But this stream was very elucidating for me, and thank you for that.